The rain was crashing down so hard it felt like the sky itself was angry with me. "Get out right now, or I'm calling the police," my daughter screamed, her voice sharp enough to cut through the storm. She stood in the doorway of the house she believed was hers, her eyes burning with rage and disgust. Water soaked my hair and clothes as my belongings were thrown across the front yard like trash. A blouse I had sewn with my own hands years ago lay in the mud. The dress I wore to her wedding was half submerged in a puddle. My shoes, the only decent pair I owned, slammed against the metal fence. I was 61 years old, and in that moment, I realized my life had become a public spectacle. Next to her stood Brad, my son-in-law. He was filming everything with his phone. He was laughing. Not nervously. Not uncomfortably. He was enjoying it. Like my humiliation was a form of entertainment. Neighbors began to appear. Some peeked through their curtains. Others stepped onto their porches. They watched in silence, not saying a single word. Because when you're an old woman, people assume you must have done something wrong. They believe you deserve whatever happens to you. "This house is mine," my daughter shouted again. "You have nothing here." Her words struck deeper than the cold rain soaking into my bones. Yet I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply bent down and gathered what I could, stuffing wet clothes into a torn plastic bag. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip anything. Brad kept recording. Every time I heard his laugh, something inside me broke a little more. When there was nothing left to pick up, I turned to face them. My daughter looked at me like I was a stranger. Like I hadn't stayed up all night when she was sick. Like I hadn't worked myself into exhaustion to build her future. I smiled. It surprised her. "No problem," I said softly. Then I turned away and walked into the storm. I didn't look back. A cab stopped at the corner. The driver stared at me but asked no questions. He took me to a small roadside motel where no one cared who you were or why you were there. I paid for 3 nights and locked myself inside the room. Only then did I allow my body to shake. I stared at my wrinkled hands, hands that had worked for decades. Hands that had built everything my daughter thought was hers. She didn't know the truth. No one did. But I did. And that truth was my power. I pulled out my phone and called a number I had saved long ago. Attorney Sarah Jenkins, a calm voice answered. "This is Eleanor Ross," I said. "It's time to activate everything we prepared." There was a pause. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Once we begin, there's no going back." I thought about the rain. The laughter. The neighbors watching. "I'm sure," I said. And just like that, the storm inside me began to settle. To understand how I reached that stormy night, you need to know what my life looked like before everything collapsed. 21 years earlier, I was 40 years old, married, and living a quiet, ordinary life. My husband, Robert, was a bus driver. He wasn't rich, but he was kind, dependable, and devoted to our little family. Our daughter, Madison, was 11, thin, shy, with eyes too big for her face. She adored her father. One Tuesday morning, Robert left for work like always. He kissed my cheek, told Madison to behave, and walked out the door. He never came back. A truck struck his bus on the highway. The police said he died instantly. They spoke as if those words were supposed to comfort me. As if instantly could erase the hole that opened inside my chest. Madison cried every night. She would crawl into my bed, shaking, whispering that she wanted her daddy. I held her, promising that everything would be okay, even though I didn't believe it myself. We had no savings. No house. Just a small rented apartment and bills that never stopped coming. The insurance company gave us $20,000. $20,000 for a whole life. I knew that money would disappear in less than a year if I used it for daily expenses. So I made a decision that would shape our future. I spent $5,000 on an industrial sewing machine and supplies. I had basic sewing skills, but now I turned them into survival. I worked from before sunrise until nearly midnight, 7 days a week. School uniforms, wedding dresses, repairs, anything people would pay for. My fingers bled. My eyes burned from exhaustion. But I never stopped. The remaining $15,000 went into savings. Every extra dollar I earned went there too. We lived on the bare minimum, cheap food, old clothes, no vacations, no luxuries. Madison wore clothes I sewed from leftover fabric. Our apartment felt more like a workshop than a home. People judged me. They said I was too strict, too obsessed with money, too focused on the future. But I wasn't chasing wealth. I was building safety. After 3 years of relentless work, I had saved $50,000. That's when I saw the opportunity. An old, damaged house in a modest neighborhood was for sale. It needed repairs, but I saw potential. I convinced the bank to loan me the rest, even though they doubted me. That house became the first stone in a foundation I never told my daughter about. Because I believed love meant sacrifice. And I believed my silence was protecting her. But silence has a price. Buying that first house changed everything, even though my daughter never realized it. I spent 6 months fixing it with my own hands. I learned how to paint walls, repair sinks, replace broken outlets, and patch cracked floors. I hired help only when I had no choice, because every dollar mattered. When the house was finally ready, I rented it out. After paying the mortgage, I made only a small profit, but it was steady. That money became hope. I kept sewing. I kept saving. And 3 years later, I bought another house. Then another. Each one was run down, each one became a source of income after I restored it. I reinvested every cent. By the time Madison turned 17, I owned 5 rental properties. The monthly income was enough to cover her future education, my bills, and the mortgage of the first home. Yet we still lived in our tiny apartment. I didn't want her to grow up spoiled. I wanted her to understand effort. But I made a mistake. Madison was accepted into a prestigious university. She was proud, but also ashamed. She told me that her classmates came from wealthy families, that they looked down on her, and that she hated explaining that her mother was a seamstress. Her words broke me. I wanted to protect her. I wanted her to feel equal, admired, secure. So I did something I believed was love, but it became my greatest regret. I bought a beautiful 3-story house near her university. It was in a wealthy neighborhood, with a garden and wide windows. It cost more than I had ever imagined spending. And then I put it in her name. I told her it was her reward for working hard. That it was hers. She cried with happiness and hugged me. She said I was the best mother in the world. But I never told her the truth. I never told her that I paid the mortgage every month. That the money came from my rental properties. That I still worked nonstop in my sewing workshop to keep everything running. I let her believe she had earned it all herself. That lie grew quietly between us, turning into pride, then entitlement. College changed Madison. She stopped introducing me as her mother. She asked me to pretend I was an investor when her friends visited. I served food, cleaned, and stayed invisible. That's when she met Brad. He was charming, arrogant, and convinced he deserved everything. From the first moment I saw him, I felt uneasy. But Madison adored him. She believed he represented the life she wanted. Slowly, he moved in. And slowly, I began to disappear. Brad didn't just enter our lives, he took over. At first, he came to study with Madison. Then he stayed for dinner. Soon, entire weekends passed with him sleeping in the guest room, using our space as if it belonged to him. He never offered to help with groceries or bills. He never asked permission. He simply settled in, confident that he was entitled to everything around him. Worse than that was the way he treated me. He spoke to me like I was hired help. He asked me to iron his clothes, prepare his meals, wash his laundry. And when something wasn't perfect, he criticized me openly. Madison never defended me. She smiled and stayed silent, as if agreeing with him. One evening, Brad's family came over for dinner. His parents and brothers arrived dressed in expensive clothes, talking loudly about business deals and social connections. I spent hours cooking and setting the table. When they arrived, Madison welcomed them like royalty. No one introduced me. I carried plates in and out of the dining room like a shadow. When Brad's mother praised the house, Madison proudly claimed she had built everything herself. I stood in the kitchen washing dishes, swallowing the pain. After that night, Brad began inviting more people. The house became his office, his meeting place, his stage. I became invisible. Madison graduated with honors. The celebration at the house was enormous. I paid for everything. I worked for days to prepare food for dozens of guests. During the party, someone asked if I was part of the catering staff. Before I could answer, Madison said yes. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Months later, Madison got a job at a law firm. Brad bounced between jobs, blaming everyone else for his failures. They spent money freely while I covered every bill. Then came their wedding. It was grand, expensive, and overwhelming. I sold one of my properties to pay for it. On the day itself, I stayed in the kitchen while others celebrated. I barely danced with my daughter. I barely appeared in the photos. After the wedding, Brad moved in permanently. The house stopped being a home. It became a battlefield. They moved me into a tiny storage room. They controlled what rooms I could use. They spoke to me like I was a burden. But what they didn't know was that I had prepared. I had kept every document. Every receipt. Every contract. And I had something else, proof. From the day Brad officially moved in, my life became a quiet nightmare. He began monitoring the household expenses, even though every bill was paid from my accounts. He questioned how much I spent on groceries, criticized what I bought, and demanded explanations for things I paid for with my own money. Madison supported him. She nodded along, agreeing with his every word, as if he were the authority in a house built by my sacrifice. They didn't know the truth. Hidden in a safety deposit box were the original documents, proof of every mortgage payment, every rental property, every transfer. The deed to the house, though in Madison's name, had never been fully finalized. One final authorization still belonged to me. Years earlier, when I first felt something was wrong, my attorney had helped me draft a conditional agreement. Madison signed it without reading, believing it was a tax form. It stated that the house was hers only if she treated me with dignity. Any abuse would void the contract. And now, I was collecting evidence. I recorded every insult, every threat, every moment of humiliation. My phone stayed nearby, silently capturing their cruelty. I kept a journal with dates and details. I stored messages, photos, and videos. One night, Brad demanded that I sell my rental properties and let him invest the money. I refused. His mask fell. He cornered me against the wall, shouting that I owned nothing. Madison stood silent. I sent the recording to my lawyer. Still, I waited. I needed witnesses. I needed the truth to be seen. One afternoon, I overheard Madison telling her aunt on the phone that maybe I should be placed in a nursing home because I was in the way. I recorded every word. That night, I decided. I called my lawyer. "It's time," I said. She warned me it would be a battle. I told her I was ready. I sent her everything. The trap was set. 3 days after I sent the final evidence to my lawyer, Madison announced a birthday dinner for Brad. Not for me, my birthday had passed weeks earlier without anyone remembering. This celebration was for him, and she wanted everything to be perfect. She invited relatives, friends, coworkers, and neighbors. More than 20 people. Once again, I paid for everything. Decorations, food, drinks, even the cake, all from my money. 2 days before the event, Madison told me something that broke what little hope I still had. "When the guests arrive, stay in the kitchen," she said calmly. "Don't come out unless I call you." I asked if I could at least say hello. "It's better if you don't," she replied. "You make things awkward." I said nothing. That afternoon, I hid my phone in the kitchen, recording. I placed another old phone in the living room where it could capture everything. The guests arrived. Laughter filled the house. I carried plates, served drinks, and disappeared again. No one spoke to me. It felt like I didn't exist. At one point, Madison's aunt came into the kitchen for wine. She told me Madison said I was confused and losing my memory. That maybe I needed to be placed somewhere safe. I realized Madison had already prepared the story. She was slowly convincing everyone I was unstable. When it was time for the cake, Madison called me in. Everyone sang. Brad smiled proudly. His father raised his glass and praised the house as if Brad and Madison had built it together. Something inside me finally broke. I told the truth. I said I built the house. I said I paid for everything. I said it was all my work. The room fell silent. Madison screamed that I was lying. Brad grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the door. Guests watched in shock. No one stopped him. It had started raining. They threw me outside. My belongings followed, clothes, shoes, memories, tossed into the yard. Brad filmed me while laughing. Madison stood in the doorway and told me to leave. So I did. And once again, I smiled. The cab took me to the same small motel near the highway. My clothes were soaked, my body shaking from the cold, but my mind was calm. I knew the storm outside was nothing compared to what was about to happen. As soon as I locked the motel door, I sent a message to my lawyer. Activate everything. Now. Her reply came seconds later. Understood. The documents are already filed. The judge is reviewing the case. I took a hot shower, letting the water wash away the mud and shame. When I checked my phone, I saw that my hidden devices had captured everything: Brad's threats, Madison's screams, the violence, the public humiliation. I sent every file to my lawyer. She called immediately. With this evidence, she said, the case is solid. The judge is furious. There will be a temporary eviction order and an investigation for elder abuse and property fraud. For the first time in years, someone was standing up for me. The next morning, she called again. The order is ready. The police will escort you back to the house. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was older. Tired. But I saw strength in my eyes. At 9 sharp, 2 police cars arrived. My lawyer hugged me and said, "This ends today." When we reached the house, neighbors were already watching. The officers knocked. Brad opened the door, confused and pale. Madison stood behind him, shaking. The officer read the court order. They were being investigated. They had violated a conditional agreement. The house legally belonged to me. Madison cried. Brad argued. But the truth was on paper. They were given 2 hours to leave. Neighbors gathered, listening. Some apologized. Others offered to testify. When Madison and Brad walked out with suitcases, no one spoke. No one helped them. The house was silent again. Mine. For the first time in years, I stood in the living room and felt something return. My dignity. When the patrol cars finally drove away and the neighbors slowly returned to their homes, the house fell into a silence I had not felt in years. I stood alone in the living room, surrounded by furniture I had paid for, walls I had repaired, and memories that carried both joy and pain. This place had once been my greatest gift, and my deepest wound. Sarah stayed with me that afternoon. She explained the next legal steps, the hearings, the permanent ownership confirmation, and the charges that would follow. But more than that, she sat beside me on the couch and let me cry. Because winning doesn't erase years of loss. It only gives you the space to heal. That night, I walked through every room. The small storage space they had forced me into, the kitchen where I had cooked countless meals, the garden where I once watched Madison play as a child. I touched the walls and whispered goodbye to the woman I had been, the one who stayed silent, who accepted less, who believed love meant enduring pain. The next morning, sunlight filled the windows. For the first time, the house felt warm again. Neighbors began stopping by. Some apologized for not stepping in sooner. Others shared how they had recorded the stormy night and were ready to testify. Their support reminded me that silence is powerful, but so is truth. I donated one of my rental homes to a women's shelter. I hired help for the rest. I allowed myself to rest. Weeks later, Madison tried to call. I let it ring. Some wounds need distance to heal. I didn't feel hatred. I felt clarity. I had given my youth, my strength, my love. Now it was time to give myself peace. I returned to sewing, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The sound of the machine reminded me of who I was before fear stole my voice. I was not invisible anymore. I was not weak. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not because I was pretending, but because I finally believed in the future I had built with my own hands.